Edit audio.
Hey there, it's Anne Roderick Jones. I'm the host and writer of Ozarks True Crime. Today we're going to do a little background episode to talk about exactly what goes into making a podcast. I'm joined by some of the awesome team who works on this show, our lead producer, Ali Sirwa.
Hi.
And the CEO of Edit Audio, Steph Colburn.
Hello, hello.
Okay, so let's dive right into the questions.
Exciting. So yeah, this question I have for both of you. What is your favorite true crime podcast right now that is not Ozarks True Crime?
Ooh, Annie, you go first.
One that I've listened to recently that I loved is Bone Valley by Gilbert King. It's kind of talks about our justice system, and he does an incredible job researching this case and is so passionate about everything. I loved it. I think it's fantastic. Steph?
So I just started this. It's called Violation. It's by Boston's NPR W. Burr and I think the Marshall Project. And they use this crime that happened in the 80s as a way to talk about America's parole system. And it seems like they're doing a really cool job of that. But I just like the production of that. They're bringing people in to talk about these bigger issues through a true crime angle, which seems cool. What about you, Ali?
I recently listened to The Coldest Case in Laramie, which I really enjoyed. I listened to it on a little road trip and it was great. I feel like it just taught me a lot about how it's very cool to show people the way you report on things. I feel like in our show, often we'll do reporting and kind of take some of it out to spare the listener our kind of digging and how we find context. But I thought it was really cool how the host, you're hear her on the calls being okay, wait, who's that person? Can I get their number? You're really along with her as she's reporting. And I really thought it was cool to get those insights.
Cool.
So that was a fun one.
I love that in parallel with what we're doing right now, which is answering people's questions, which I feel does sort of provide some insight onto our process and how we do things.
Yeah, there's so much behind the scenes stuff that I think people don't see. And I've noticed that when we do put those little tidbits in the show, it makes it more interesting. And I love that. I thought that was a great podcast too. Ali, thanks for recommending that.
Okay, so the number one question that I get asked all the time, that I assume you also get asked all the time, Annie, is how the heck did this begin? So how did this begin? How did the idea for this begin? Season 1 was with the Springfield 3. How? Tell us.
Yeah, I do get asked that a lot, Steph. I had been hearing about this case my whole life. I remembered it happening. And when I would tell other people, when I was even in college in San Francisco, or I now live in New York, and I would tell people about this, and everyone seemed to find it interesting. It wasn't just people who are from the Ozarks. And so I kind of thought, well, maybe I'll pitch this idea to an editor for a feature story, or maybe I'll write a book about it. But then when I started listening to podcasts myself, I thought that that was such a great platform to tell this story, and that I could really dive into the research. And, podcasts are kind of just this open-ended Wild West of storytelling, and that if you want to dive into it and do tons of research and talk about it for 25 minutes an episode, you can do that. And so I thought maybe I'll make a podcast, but I didn't know how to make a podcast. I had no idea how to make a podcast, and I knew how to write and research and interview and even edit a little bit. But as far as the production, I had no idea what I was doing. And so that's when I started reaching out to different podcast production companies, basically just Googling people. I really had no idea. I didn't know anyone who had ever made a podcast before. So,
well, I'm so glad that I pay for those Google search results.
We got you.
We got you. But yeah, how did I assume you talked to other? I know you talked to other production companies, people. How did you decide on us?
Well, I felt like that was mutual, but I talked to quite a few places before y'all, and it just didn't feel like a fit. Most of them were kind of tech dudes and kind of wanted to tell me what they thought I should do. Oh, you should be doing this, or oh, do that. And that's great. I definitely needed feedback on what I needed to do, but it felt less like a collaboration. And I wanted someone who cared more about the people within the story and the story itself than maybe oh, is this going to be a HBO special or whatever. And so when I met initially with Steph, before I had met the team, I have said this before, but I felt like it was just this like great first date and that we totally got each other's vision. I didn't know Steph at all before this, like as a person. So the fact that like you immediately came off so willing to tell this story in a way that was sensitive to the people behind it who have a lot of trauma meant so much to me. Now that I know you, I'm like, oh, that totally makes sense. But I didn't know that at first. Like, you know, it was just like I was meeting a business person. And so I got that vibe immediately and knew that I wanted to work with someone and work with a company that stands for the values that you all stand behind. And you can probably talk more about that. But like, that was really important to me. And that we were both kind of just like new going into it. It was like, you know, everything about podcasting, but it was like your first original. And it just felt like we were kind of going into this exciting project together as partners.
Yeah, which I love because it like kind of makes us more flexible to define what that looks like for us. You know, like we were like, well, I don't know. What do you want to do? What do we want to do? Like, how can we best support each other? And it ended up being really nice. So I did, before going into this, fine, because that was like at the beginning, just before the pandemic that we first started talking, right? Like Allie.
Yep.
I went to Missouri. I think it was February 2020. So it was like right before.
Because Steph, do you have the email when we started? I think it was like in end of 2019 or something.
Yeah, I found the email November 7th, 2019, 1:26 p.m. Anne Roderick Jones. Hi, I'm in the very beginning stages of starting a podcast, as in I have an idea that I'd like to bring to fruition, and that's about it. I'm a journalist and have experience with writing and interviews, but I'm lost on where to start with this whole thing and would love help starting, editing, well, almost all of it. Thank you.
Oh my God, cute.
Oh my gosh. Wow. I sound so professional.
Then I said, hi, Anne. Thank you for reaching out. I'd love to hear more about your podcast, its timelines, and how we can help. Being a journalist will give you a huge leg up in being able to create compelling stories, and I'm excited to hear more about it. For production and editing, we charge, on a rate that we don't anymore, a 30-minute interview episode usually takes about an hour to edit. Definitely not if it's true crime.
Yeah, nope.
I can give you more accurate quote when I know a bit more about the show that you're interested in making. Are you free for a call? Then we had a phone call. We had some tech issues with the phone call.
I'm going to say that was on my end.
And then Allie met Annie for the first time on Friday, December 6th, 2019.
That's true.
Yeah.
For some reason in my head, I just remember like only meeting you in Missouri, but of course we met before.
Yes, we met before.
But I remember being in the airport, and this was the first show that I had ever produced also. So like, I didn't really know what I was doing at this point. I was fully faking it, Annie. But like being in the airport and getting these emails from you being like, okay, like this is another theory about the case. And I was just like, oh my God, what are we getting into? I'm a little scared.
You were great.
Yeah. Thanks for jumping into water when I was like, can you swim?
And I was like, I will learn.
Wait, Steph, I think one thing I would be like great to talk about is kind of like, I don't know that everyone knows kind of the basis of Edit Audio and like just why you started the company and kind of like your mission behind it.
Yeah, I started the company in a year that I don't remember. I started the company before that. I mean, we were a company before we started working together, but the company started with me as a freelancer, and I had started it because I did school. I did like a good mix of audio production and also did creative writing and like script writing and poetry, which I don't know if that so much helps, but does make me more well-rounded. And I was like, oh, I need to like get a job and not just be like, you know, an artiste. So I got this job working for this marketing company doing their podcasts and video content. And then I hated my boss. And so I left and started freelancing while I was like bartending and doing some other jobs. And something that was like a recurring pattern in school or in different recording studios I'd work at or just like talking to people was that I was like always one of the only non-cis white men in any room I was in. So when I started hiring people to work with me, I was like, okay, like maybe I can hire people with like like, you know, that are also othered in this industry and like hopefully like make some tiny impact on the future of the industry. It really just grew like very organically. Like I was doing a lot of for hire work, and then I, you know, had this portfolio, podcasting boomed. I had a lot of work. I had to hire contractors to work under me. And then slowly but surely they became employees. And now we have like a business that operates in 3 countries. So very wild. But this was our first original series. And I'm really like grateful for that, because I think it, looking back on it, like defined like what I wanted for the future of this company. Like when we were working at the contract of this production, like I was just very much like, I want to make this with you. You seem like a cool person. We seem like we can do things like really well together. Like we have these skills that you might not have, and you have these skills that we might not have. So I was like, this is great. We can learn from each other. We can build something really amazing together. It seems like we have similar values. So that's going to work well. And it was just very much like 50-50. Like we'll just do everything and do it 50-50. And I treated it like an art project or something, which lawyers hate, but I love. And then the pandemic happened like very soon after. And I was like, well, we got to keep our team busy. So like, let's start doing more of these. And I don't know if that would have happened without this project. So in a way, it was like very serendipitous.
I'm happy you agreed to it.
Me too.
All right. So I have a question here that someone wrote in, and they want to know what everyone's favorite part of making a podcast is and least favorite part of making a podcast.
Ooh.
I can go first on this because I think I know mine pretty well.
Okay.
My favorite is I love interviewing people. I love interviewing like real people. My career, I guess before and sort of still now in magazines, has been interviewing like, you know, celebrities and influencers and dermatologists, and those people are great. But interviewing people for this is just something so different to me. They're very vulnerable. I just feel like they trust me, and that just feels really, it's such a privilege to me as a writer to be able to experience that. So I love that. It wasn't something I ever thought I would be doing, but my least favorite part is recording, even though I love Allie and Steph, and they're so wonderful and they're great teachers. There's so much that goes on behind the scenes. And on my end, one of those is reading the same sentence 10 different times and then still having someone say, oh, their voice is annoying. But that I'm okay about. That's like, fine, whatever, it's my voice. But I think it's just like, you know, you have to redo it. You have to like maybe sometimes say it peppier or sometimes take a pause. And so each time you hear a podcast, that's probably like those people have been saying those words over and over and over and over again. So that's probably the most difficult part on my end, even though we always have fun when we're doing it. And it's the best that it could be. It's my least favorite part.
Yeah. Sometimes you do it so much that the words lose all meaning.
Mm-hmm.
I love that when we do those and then Annie will say a word like completely different from how I've ever heard the word. And I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah, the Ozarks pronunciation.
Yeah.
And as Canadians, we're like, oh, whoa,
yeah.
Okay.
And I'm like, is that how you say the word? And I'm wrong. I'm not sure. But there's no wrong or right. I have my favorite, I think, but not my least favorite.
You go first.
Okay, my favorite, I think, which I'm just coming up with this now, but when I was thinking about like talking to y'all about this and like what like stands out to me, and there's this moment that we had a really, really hard interview and it was like really draining. And it was us 3 and then Kathleen, and we were in the car, we were leaving the interview, and I don't know how this got decided, but we had like options. Like we were like, maybe we could go shopping after or do this or do that. And I was like, no, we're going to go sit by the water, and did that. And I feel like that is like a really beautiful moment in my head. The reason I think it's beautiful is because I don't think a lot of productions think about the people on the team and like how to like take care of yourself and stuff. And I feel like the difference between season 1 and season 2 was a pandemic, but also that we've like grown in a way that makes us like not only like thoughtful and caring about the production, like the interviews that we're doing and the people that we're talking to, but to ourselves too, and making sure that we like do little like self-care things while we're together. So that's my favorite part. Those are the parts that stand out because they make me feel like I'm growing as a human and a business owner and a producer and all of the things. But they also are like nice moments where we're all together and it feels kind of like summer camp. And my least favorite is honestly probably around the same vein, where I think sometimes I feel like, is this worth it? Like, we're having these really horrible conversations with people that like bring up a lot of emotions, and like, is my team going to be okay? Am I protecting them enough? Are these people that we're talking to going to be okay after this? And what can I do to like make sure that everyone is? But I'm also happy that I have that thought, because I think without it, I wouldn't be as good of a producer.
True.
That's a good answer, Steph.
Thanks.
Now I have to follow that. No, I think my favorite thing also like the people on our team, but also like meeting everybody in the Ozarks. I think going into it, I thought it was going to be this like horribly dark, really sad. And it is definitely very sad. But like there's also been so many lovely moments with the people we've spoken to.
Yes.
A lot of times people have been like, thank you for telling this story. Like it feels very cathartic to be able to like pass it on to you and kind of get it off my chest and, you know, into your podcast. So I think I thought it would be like, we would be like kind of extracting these stories from people, but a lot of them are actually like, thank you so much for letting me tell you this. So that's been very heartwarming. And my least favorite is probably just like the final stages of editing, when there's just like revisions, and you're just like, okay, we gotta lock it in. But there's like all these other weird little like, okay, we need one more pickup. It's like kind of finalizing the final episodes can be stressful. Yeah, I think that's my least favorite, but also very important. So
Yeah.
Okay, Annie, we have another question, which is, Annie, how do you start writing the story, especially something like the Springfield 3 that has so many theories and so much information online? How do you narrow it down?
I think so. Now I'm starting to research and write season 3, and I think there's some similarities in all of them. At the initial stages, I just spend researching tons and tons of research. It's something I've done throughout my entire career, so I'm really comfortable with it. It's basically just like stalking people and reading tons and tons of old newspaper archives, trying to figure out what's accurate. In terms of this, there are so many theories. People have, you know, wild theories, they have plausible theories. So I think it was just narrowing down those like ones that seem plausible and suspects that seem plausible, and really diving into that, because I think it's like you could easily spend too much time on something that doesn't seem like it's, let's just say, alien abduction. And I'm not like saying that, you know, if you believe in that, whatever, I totally get that. But like, it just wasn't something I needed to spend 50 hours of my time on. And so doing that, I usually use like whiteboards and lots of Post-it notes to help me kind of try to like tie the lines together. And then I just like start with episode 1, and this one came out really quickly. I was able to write it really quickly. And then from there, we go in and we slot in interviews. The entire team will make a list of people that we want to interview. Hopefully we can get most of those. Definitely going to get a lot of people saying no. We interview people, slot those in, and then edit away.
Yeah.
And we're often sometimes, you know, adding stuff in at the last minute. The great thing about podcasting is that if we get new information, we can always tag that on to a bonus episode. It's kind of these like ever evolving stories that we get to tell. So that's kind of how the writing process goes, really.
I was thinking about that when you were talking about like deciding to make this a podcast, because to me, the thing that works really well of making this a podcast rather than a book or something is that it is sort of always alive. Like, it is like always existing, and you can always add to it and like, you know, come back to it. And I feel like that's really important with these stories that don't have these like neatly tied up in a bow endings. You know, you're not like, I don't know, you're not like doing a disservice by like pretending there's an ending. You know, the podcast is always open and we're always going to know more, which feels like a really good medium for it to be in.
I agree. Yeah.
Sure.
And I just wanted to add, I feel like a lot of people don't know this, but we get like a ton of emails like every week still, even about season 1, of people with like different theories and different things to look out for. So like that was a really good question. And also, like, I don't think people know how much of your time you spend being like, okay, like, how do I thoughtfully answer this person? And also, like, is this something that we should spend time with? And I don't know how you do that, because I can fall in a rabbit hole on the internet for 9 days about something. Like, you give me like a rock and I'll be like, yes, I will investigate this rock for 17 hours.
Yeah.
You are a weirdly good investigator, Steph.
I'm an internet sleuth.
Yeah. Steph is so great at that.
It is kind of like a funnel, I find. It's like, especially talking to like different cops or people in law enforcement over the course of these 2 seasons. It's kind of like, because we asked them too, like, how do they narrow down the leads? And it's kind of what we're doing also, where it's like they get so many and then you kind of have to like figure out which ones are actually worth looking into. We get so many emails and then it's like, okay, which one of these actually work with the other theories that we have? Like, is it worth pursuing them or not?
I mean, I would say that like I take time to go through each one. And even if it doesn't seem like, oh, this doesn't, fit the exact funnel that we're looking at, it doesn't mean that we're not going to spend time on each one. Like, we certainly will spend time on each one. And, we appreciate all of them. And those are also sent to law enforcement as well. So like, it's not just ending with us. It's actually, being pushed towards law enforcement as well, so they can have a look at it.
True.
Okay, next question. So after Annie, you like narrow things down, the research is happening. Like, Allie, you have sat in on a lot of these interviews and you're like going through them and trying to fit them into the story arc. How do you go about editing those? How do you choose them?
It's quite an organic process between like Annie writing and then like me coming in with audio stuff. So like usually Annie will have, like a skeleton of an episode. We'll like write it out very well. And then we've already done the interview. So like in an interview, you can remember like, that's a really good quote. That's a really good quote. So I kind of have those in my mind and then we transcribe everything so I can go back and like search in all of the interviews and like find the exact quote that I want and start like slotting them in. And I should note that our production coordinator, Kathleen, who is an angel, is also producing the show. So we're usually doing this together. We're like editing and writing scripts together. So we'll be on a call together going through all the interviews and working them into the episodes.
Yeah.
So usually it's like from the interviews, we're either looking for like less explainy things, but like more emotion. So like if maybe somebody is like telling something that they saw. So it's like quite descriptive. So like we would maybe use that for, I don't know, if we want to like heighten the image of what somebody saw or like a crime scene, we'll use like their description of it. Or we're looking for, like I said, like emotion. So like if there's a really emotional quote, we'll put that in there. And then sometimes we'll like move the script around if we're like, ooh, okay, like this episode would be really good to open with this clip. Like it's super impactful. Yeah. So then usually I'll go in, put some clips in, send it back to Annie. She'll review some more, send it to some other team members. So it's quite organic. And like by the end, we have a script that everybody likes to work on. And then from there, I start editing. And usually I'm working off the script, but then sometimes too, I'll remember like, oh, there's a really good clip here. And I'll go in and like add that and maybe shift some stuff around because hopefully Annie trusts me enough to like give me a little bit of leeway in editing.
How do you choose? Because like the music across both seasons is like it's very similar, but it's also very different. And like, I think even within episodes, the music choices that you make are very different. So how do you go about choosing the music you want to use?
Well, I guess at the beginning, Annie and I kind of had a conversation like, okay, what do you want it to sound like? Annie sent me some like music from the Ozarks that was a little bit more like traditional to get a sense of like what essence we wanted. So it was like a lot of kind of like twangy guitars. But then also like there's kind of like a lot of synth in some of the songs to like build. If there's kind of like a tense moment, I'll add like a light synth underneath to kind of like get people into it a little more. But yeah, I really wanted, like first season specifically, Annie talks a lot about the place in the Ozarks. So like for that, it was very much like, okay, kind of twangy guitars, a little bit eerie, but also like kind of delicate and beautiful because that's what the place is like. And then Feeney Family was a little different. It was, I mean, obviously still based in the Ozarks, but the place was less of a character in it. So that I think I kind of leaned more heavily on the synth and less on the countryish twang. And we also made the theme song, which was so fun and a hilarious exercise because at that time, like I didn't know anything about music. So I made it with my partner who has a studio. So I would be like saying, okay, like it kind of needs to sound like a little bit country, like a little bit spooky, but not too spooky, but like, like it was like very funny exercise for him to be like, okay, like this. And I'd be like, no, like a little more, like it was a mess. And he was like, I don't know what you're talking about. But by the end, we had a really great song that I love. A friend of mine told me that it makes her cry.
Aww.
Which is so nice.
Shout out to Patrick.
Yay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you, Patrick.
I have a question for both of you because we like sit in a lot of like difficult conversations with people where we're like asking them to share their trauma. How do you like reconcile that with yourself? How do you make sure that you're being like kind to them? How do you navigate that in an interview? Especially for you, Annie, because you're the person who's like mainly in the conversation, but also like you have a lot of experience doing interviews in different contexts where I imagine this is like really different. So how does that play out for you?
Yeah, it is really different than like having someone who has like an agent and is media trained and really careful about their answers. But I think I spend lots of time beforehand getting to know people, even if it's law enforcement. I think in this circumstance, you really want people to trust you so that they can speak freely and they're comfortable telling their story to you. And so I usually start out like months and months before we even interview them, getting to know the people, talking to them on the phone, just letting them know that I'm there to let them tell their story. Like I'm not the one who controls their story and their narrative, that they have control over this. And so then as a team, we always say, if you start crying and you want us to edit it out, we can, we'll do that for you. If you say something that you later want to retract, like it's totally fine. Like that's the great thing about being a scripted show like this, is that if someone later feels like they said something too personal or too emotional or inaccurate, then they can ask us to take it out and we will. There's not going to be any fighting for this like clip because someone doesn't feel comfortable saying it. Yeah. And I always let people know that the story's theirs and that we're just like the vehicle to tell it. And then keeping in contact with them. I still keep in contact with people, from season 1 and from season 2 now. And just, and then Steph and I both got trained in trauma reporting. So I think that was really helpful. It's something that's just always on our mind all the time, is making sure that people are comfortable around us. I think that as a team, we provide a really comfortable atmosphere too. Mm-hmm. We're welcoming. We all rent an Airbnb together that we said kind of feels like camp. But when we bring people in for interviews, like they're in a home with us. And, maybe we're having coffee and some sweets or whatever that may be. And just, we want it to feel as comfortable as possible. And we don't want it to be like you're sitting in like a courtroom or something. Yeah. And I think that's a big part of it too, is doing that. And just listening listening well to people.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, I just want to like reiterate that I think like reminding people that we're not out to get them. I think a lot of people are like, understandably, especially when they've gone through trauma, like weary of media and how they're going to be portrayed. And that's like a very natural feeling to have, but like gets exacerbated if you've gone through something like this with a media junket. So I think just reminding people like, we're not out to get you. We're just like, we want to hear your story, and like anything can be changed or removed. If you want to like take a beat, that's fine. Like we're here. I think that's really important. What about you, Allie?
Yeah. Before I actually worked on a true crime show, I would like listen to some shows, and it always kind of irked me when somebody would be like, I found this wild case and I'm going into this small town to figure it out. And it's like, you're a total outsider coming from somewhere and you just heard about this wild case that you want to like look into. But like, what about the people who tell you the stories? Like, it's very traumatic for them. So I think Annie's background of like being from there helps a lot, because Annie knows so many people in the community. Often in interviews, Annie will be like, oh, like my aunt works with you, or like, there's like this like close connection, which I think really helps put people at ease and like helps them trust Annie, not to mention like all of the work you put in to like make them feel comfortable, which I think is incredible. But then, yeah, in interviews, just like keeping that sense of like calm and comfort. Like often Annie will be like kind of the one interviewing them, and I'll be like set up with my headphones and like recording.
Yeah. I
also try to like check myself and be like, okay, like bring it down a notch. Don't be like aggro reporter. Like at the end, if there's still stuff that that hasn't been answered, we'll like come back and, inquire more, but in a calm way to make them feel like you said, like we're not trying to like get them or anything.
Yeah, I think something that like doesn't happen in true crime stories but has to happen here is like normally if we're in the middle of a recording and, you know, someone stumbles on their words or we need to get them to re-say something, we will stop them and be like, hey, can you repeat this sentence again? You said this word instead of this word. But I do find that often in this, because it's such a sensitive topic, usually we're not doing that. But yeah, the ability to be like, okay, in this moment, I am like a real person who's like empathetic and listening to this person's like story, but also like I'm a producer and I need my job. Like I need this to turn out well and get the best thing. Like we're like constantly grappling with that. But I think that you both do a really beautiful job of like balancing those things out and deciding when it's important to get the pickup or like, you know, prioritize the person's heart.
I think the way we do it we've kind of found like a nice rhythm in that we will just, you know, ask questions, let people tell their stories, and then let it go organically. And then at the end, if we need some like pickups or whatever, we're not interrupting someone while they're telling us something that's super personal to them. So I think that that's worked really well for us.
Yeah, it feels better that way. Also, another thing I thought of, like a lot of the people we're interviewing are older. So especially in season 1, when we were doing a lot of interviews remotely because of the pandemic, it was like a lot of helping older people through tech issues. Like there was one interview we did where like I was on the phone with somebody for like multiple days trying to like upload these files, you know, it's like, so I think just being there for them and like helping them through any challenges that come about because of the podcast is also important.
Yeah. And I wanted to say this earlier, but like Annie, like a testament to that, like relationship building that you do beforehand. I mean, there was someone in season 1 who declined to be interviewed. And then after hearing the care that you took with other interviews, agreed and wanted to be interviewed and reached back out to like tell their perspective. So that I think is, you know, good proof for how lovely you are.
Well, thanks. You know, we all do this together for sure. One thing we work on is not sensationalizing this, but these stories that we're telling, like they don't need to be sensationalized. No. Like the story itself is very traumatic and difficult and hard to tell. So it's like, you don't really need that push, honestly. I don't feel that we do. So yeah.
So on that note, how do you take care of yourself?
Well, Steph, I think you talked about this before, but this is something I've never thought about in my entire life or my career is, you know, I always tend to think about like, how does that person feel after I interview them? And I usually can easily separate the subject from like my real life. But during this podcast, I had one interview in the very beginning where I left. Allie and I did this together, and I left and I like went home to my mom and grandma's, and I actually like teared up, and I was like, whoa, this has never happened to me before. I've never been so emotionally invested in something. And so I think that the way Steph runs her business is that there's nothing wrong with saying like, hey, I need to tap out and go do yoga. And like I said, we're all in this house together. People express their emotions differently after interviews. You know, someone may want to go do something fun, and someone may want to have like a good cry, and someone may want to go swimming like we did that day. And it was just like, I think that you really like allow for that and for everyone to feel comfortable. You always ask how we're doing. It's something I've never thought about like in my entire career, to be like, oh, how are you doing after the interview, you know, as far as the team goes. So I think that's just a testament to like how you run your business and the whole, just being really incredibly sensitive to how everyone is feeling, not just the person you're interviewing.
Thank you.
And it's nice that there's a team of us working on it. It's like everybody does feel supported. I remember like there was one really hard interview that we did, and I'm a total crier. Like in that interview, I was just like, keep it together, keep it together. And then after that was the day we went swimming because it was a hard one. But I think, yeah, having that space to just like feel your stuff, but also knowing that your team is there to like cover for you if you need, is very important. And doing fun activities. Because like when we go to the Ozarks, you're doing very heavy interviews for a lot of the day. Like sometimes we'll do 2 back-to-back interviews that are 2 hours long, and by the end you're a little drained. So like finding fun things to do, like we went on a cave tour, or
so
you know,
fun.
things that make you excited about the area, also not just depressed.
Lambert's.
Oh my
Home of the
gosh,
Throat
yes.
Rolls.
Jazzercise.
Yeah, we did
Yes.
Jazzercise. That was so
Oh
fun.
yeah, I talk about Jazzercise all the time since that trip. Because it's so hard. It was shockingly
Me too.
difficult.
I'll never forget Steph wearing their sunglasses while doing jazzercise. And then being like, do I put sunglasses on? We're like, yeah, it's bold. Bold style
it's a
choice.
look.
That was such a great way to like really decompress, was doing something like that. It was so fun.
Love it, love it, love
Yeah.
it.
Okay, here's a question we have. This is for everyone. What is your favorite season and why? And do you have a favorite moment or a favorite interview?
I don't like to favorite my babies.
I'm going to.
Good.
Okay.
Season one, I think was my favorite to work on just because, like I said, it was like the first show that I ever produced. So like it really did feel like my baby. Like I invested so much into it and like making music for it. Like, you know, I feel like I gave that one my all, especially at like a really weird time. Like it was mid-pandemic. So it was like mentally weird place. But like I did love working on that season. And I think just like all the theories that came out of it too, like there was so much to look into with that season and I loved it.
Can I guess y'all's favorite interview? Steph, I'm going to guess yours.
Sure.
Ooh.
I think it's Rita Sanders.
Oh, that is high on the list for sure. Like Rita Sanders is just like an incredible, I don't know how to say this without sounding crazy, but like character. Like she just like is very much herself. And it's like in a way that you don't like really experience people, I think, in the world very often. And she's just like a really good like dichotomy of differences. Like she like showed up in a lime green truck. She custom painted lime green truck. She rolled up. She had like her nails done. She's like a badass lawyer. Like she just like is all the things and like so cool. And also just like a very like hard person to describe because I don't think she fits in like the buckets that we've like told ourselves that everyone fits into. Like that to me is like just like a really cool, I don't know, it makes our job more challenging too because we're trying to describe this person to someone who like, you know, is kind of undescribable.
Yeah, Rita was very cool.
What about yours, Allie?
My favorite, that's hard because I love talking to Ron Davis. It's always a really fun interview. And like his connection with the people in the stories is so wild to me. Like he's like, oh yeah, I'm friends with Gerald Carnahan, who was in jail now, but like we'd go on road trips. Like he went on a road trip with John Feeney. Like I always find it so interesting talking to him. I also really love the interview with Lynn Hash, which was the hardest one for me emotionally, but like it was also felt like the most special just because we were in her house. She was like this lovely older woman, like who has dealt with so much, but she was like so kind and laughing and like lovely. And then during that interview too, her like personal support worker came in with like some wild information that we didn't know. So like that was a very important interview and one that was, the most emotionally challenging, but also the most rewarding, I think.
I agree. I thought Lynn allowing us into her home was just so kind and showing us like photo albums of her daughter and grandchildren. The interview that Steph and I did together with Bart Streeter, I think is one that really sticks out in my mind. We interviewed him you hear in the podcast just these clips, but like that was hours and hours long. And he gave us so much of his time. He was really vulnerable. I thought that was one that really stands out to me. Again, yes, Ron Davis, he's great. You know, when you interview journalists, it's always a little bit different. You never know what you're going to get. And with him, you know, you're always going to get some nugget of gold for sure. And his connections are really great. Yeah. Yeah. So I think those, Janice McCall to me was the one that I was talking about going back to like my mom and grandma's and, you know, for the first time being like emotionally tied to like an interview subject. And Allie and I did that one together at a room in a library. And we were also there all day long. And she gave us so much of her time. So
yeah,
I do think something that stands out about Lynn and Bart is like the like humanity or like humanness of it all. It's like all of these like terrible things have happened in their lives, but like Allie was saying, like the moments where like, you know, this is still a person who like lived a full life who's like laughing about like there's like I don't know, like it gives me like hope or something because I'm like these are like terrible things that happen, but at the end of the day, like you're still a person who's like trying to get through your life and you're still able, like you're capable of laughing, you're capable of experiencing like a full range of emotions, and like to show us that is like really beautiful, but also like to be able to like capture that and like have it live on, I think is also really beautiful.
That's a great point. It's so true. Yeah.
It's special.
Okay. So season 3 is on its way. We've hinted at a few things, but what can we tell people? What can we reveal?
Yes, season 3 is coming up in January. We have already done interviews for this, have a lot of work under our belt. And this one's going to be really different because this case is actually going to a hearing in real time. So we're going to be at the courthouse while this is happening. It's about a person who's possibly been wrongfully imprisoned. So it's a totally different subject. There is a murder accusation within this, so it falls under the true crime umbrella. But for me, I think it's one that I'm really excited to dive into because of the story that we get to tell.
Agreed.
Okay, so do you guys have any final questions to wrap this with? I feel like we asked a lot of questions.
I have no further questions.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to thank everyone for listening, and thanks for sending in your questions. And we are really excited for the 3rd season.
Stay
so
tuned.
I hope everyone will listen.
And thank you to 3 million listeners. That's so cool.
So cool.
Yes.
I never thought we would reach that. So very exciting. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.